On this episode of the Crested Butte Home podcast, my guest is Tafi, and she is not only an amazing athlete that you'll see skiing and biking around town, but she also works in the field of mine reclamation. So I really enjoyed this interview quite a bit, given how important the history of Colorado and the history of Crested Butte is tied to mining. And we still have that legacy today. Some of it is good. It's the roads and the trails that bring us into the backcountry. So many of them have their history tied to mining. But we also have water issues and open mine shafts and things like that Tara tries to take care of. So I loved this interview, and I hope you do too. And just some housekeeping. I did skip doing an episode last week, being the 4th of July. I figured everybody was busy doing that. I hope you had a great 4th. And going forward, I am probably going to try to do every 2 weeks for the podcast. So please subscribe to Apple Podcasts or anywhere on Android. That way you won't miss them if I'm going to every other week. And let's get on with the interview. Today on Crested Butte's home, we have Tafi. And Tara, please tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and all that good stuff.
Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I moved out west in 1997 to go to Colorado State University, where I studied geology. Following my education, I moved to Big Sky, Montana, and I skied about 110 days a year and had a heck of a time. And then after about 3 years, decided to go to grad school at Montana State University, where I studied land rehabilitation and spent the better part of 3 years looking at mine reclamation effectiveness on sites that had been cleaned up in the last 10 years and how the methods for those cleanups worked. Basically coming back after the fact and deciding whether or not what they did was effective or not.
Gotcha. So I guess let's start from the beginning. So Pennsylvania. So what were you into in Pennsylvania when you were growing up as a kid there?
I was a competitive figure skater, and I did that until I was about 14 years old, and I got hurt. I grew and went from about 4'8" to about 5'6" in a year, and that just wasn't real conducive.
Threw your balance off.
Yeah, that wasn't real conducive to being a elite figure skater anymore. I continued to figure skate until I graduated from high school, and I coached. And I also skied on the Western Pennsylvania race team based out of Seven Springs, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
And then I also competed in moguls.
Some moguls and racing.
Well, I quit racing and then did moguls.
Kind of like Shane McConkey, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you don't hear about people doing both very often, actually. It's kind of one or the other.
Well, I hated ski racing. I was terrible at training. I wanted to be out free skiing and banging around in the bumps, and I didn't care if it was raining, which it did a lot in Western Pennsylvania.
Right.
And I really loved to ski. And so when it came time to pick a college, I decided to pick something out west so that I could really follow that love of skiing.
Yeah.
And leave my ice skating behind.
No more, yeah.
And I really haven't been on the ice maybe a dozen times since.
That was a question I was going to ask you. Like, that's kind of frustrating, right? Do you miss it at all? Or are you this is the thing I did?
It was this crazy intense competitive lifestyle. I skated before school and after school.
Yeah.
I skated 5 days a week. My summers were ice skating only. I'd be on the ice at 6 a.m. and I'd be at the rink until 3 or 4 in the afternoon while all my friends were off.
Yeah.
Just kind of screwing off. And so, I had a wonderful childhood and I don't regret any of it, but when I was done with it, I was done with it.
Yeah.
However, I did rekindle that love of skating this last fall with the real dry fall. I got to do some just incredible lake skating down in the Gunnison River Canyon there by Blue Mesa.
Yeah.
And then also on the Taylor Reservoir. And it was probably the coolest ice skating I've ever done in my life.
It's crazy. I need to interview someone about lake skating because it's wild how noisy it is, and it's just you can just skate and skate and skate. And
it was miles of ice, and it sounded like being in Star Wars.
Totally,
it was so cool.
Wild the noises that makes. So.
Yeah, I really, I just can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd be okay if it just snowed and we.
Well, I would be okay with that too, but it was definitely really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the lemonade that you make in a dry fall.
Absolutely.
For sure. It's fun.
You make the best out of it.
So, all right. Well, you kind of started to go there. So you studied mines and mine reclamation. So why did you get into that? Why was that something you were interested in?
Well, growing up in Western Pennsylvania, it's a heavily mined area for coal. And the historic coal mining there left a significant impact to the environment.
Yeah.
And so when I was in high school, I took a AP Environmental Sciences class. It was a pilot class. I didn't get any college credit for anything, but our teacher took us to several what they call passive reclamation. And it's basically using wetlands and natural features to reclaim acid mine drainage from some of the abandoned coal mines that were in and around the area that I grew up.
Okay.
And I just thought it was the most amazing thing to be taking this coal mine, beat up, really hammered area, and taking this really contaminated water that was going into the rivers and the streams and killing fish and cleaning it with a natural product like a wetland. I thought it was so interesting and so innovative, and at that time it was really new in the mid 90s. It was something that had was really being pushed in Western Pennsylvania, and it still is utilized in Western Pennsylvania. And it fascinated me, and so I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
So that's still, I mean,
that's what I do.
You just create wetlands basically for certain types of or whatever.
I don't create wetlands very often. I live in we live in Colorado. There's not a whole lot of water, but for instance, we did a wetland restoration out at Gunsight Bridge in 2011. And that was basically pulling out about 10,000 cubic yards of coal that had been piled in the wetland from the Old Cloud City mine, the Smith Hill mine.
Right.
We pulled that out into the big wetland restoration, restored about 3 acres of wetland. So that was really neat to be able to kind of pull from what I had seen back in Pennsylvania 25 years ago to now. But the other thing is, we don't have acid mine drainage associated with coal mines in Colorado.
Right.
We have tons of acid mine drainage, but it's related to hard rock mining.
Right.
The coal mines here are relatively low sulfur, and the sulfur in the coal is what drives the acid production. Okay. And so back east, they have major problems with acid mine drainage associated with coal mines. So in Colorado, the passive treatments aren't quite as effective. We don't have 2,000 gallons a minute, coming out of a mine. We just don't have the water.
We're not as wet.
Yeah, we're not as wet. So it's a different animal here, but I always knew I wanted to clean up abandoned mines.
That's really cool. So I guess, and I know you're not probably a historian exactly, but give us like an interview or a brief overview of mining history in Colorado. I guess let's start with that so that
I'm not very good with this. I mean, we actually have a person that deals with all of our historical stuff. But mining in Colorado, mining in Colorado really took 2 different trajectories. Okay. There's a lot of coal mining in Colorado. There's coal mining along the Front Range. There's coal mining up north by Craig, Meeker, even in the Steamboat area. There's coal mining down by Durango. Yeah. And then here in Crested Butte, which people are always shocked by that because Crested Butte, you think of Crested Butte as kind of like Breckenridge or Aspen or Telluride, one of these like hard rock gold mining towns. And really, Crested Butte was a coal town and a silver mining town. So it had both. But coal was really king in Crested Butte until the 40s. So mining in Colorado started shortly after the end of the Civil War, maybe 1870s.
Yeah, I think that sounds,
And it continues on today. But, there was a really, really heavy push for coal and for gold and silver and many other minerals that are mined in Colorado. Until about the 1950s, mining was really, really heavy in Colorado. A lot of the mining ceased during the war efforts, World War I and World War II. So there were these big booms, and then the mining would kind of bust during the war effort because the men were off fighting the war and not
and they weren't metals
mining.
That were needed to produce bullets. I guess.
There were
but not really.
Coal. There was a big push for coal, but during the war effort around here, it's my understanding that a lot of the rails were actually pulled to be reused.
Oh, really?
For the iron, yeah.
Wow.
So, the mining legacy in Colorado it's really interesting to see the differences between what was a coal town and a hard rock town.
Yeah,
you look at a place like Leadville, which was a booming hard rock town.
Right.
Those buildings they're made out of brick. They're huge. They're beautiful. There was a lot of money there.
Right.
And so it would have been a really cool thing to see these towns during their heyday.
Yeah.
Which would have been the early 1900s.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's a great. And I've actually explained that to people. That's why Crested Butte is all these wooden buildings because we were just a poor coal town.
Yeah,
right?
It was a company town. This was a Colorado fuel and iron town.
Yeah.
The company owned everything. They owned all the housing. They owned the stores, the restaurants, everything.
Yeah.
And then you had the hard rock mining camps outside of Crested Butte. You had Irwin and Gothic. There was one up by Augusta area, up by Pittsburgh.
Right.
But there's even some coal mining up there as well. So it was the lion's share of the coal in Crested Butte came from Smith Hill and from the Big Mine and some of those other Jokerville, Peanut, those areas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so back in the 1800s, what environmental rules or what rules at all govern mining?
There really weren't any until 1872, which was the 1872 mining law, which really directed how you patented mine claims. But there were no environmental laws. And there were no environmental laws until the 70s, really.
The 1970s.
The 1970s. So things went really unchecked for 100 years.
Wow.
Which is why we have the mining legacy that we do, the environmental legacy that we do in the West. The East has its own problems with their historic coal, but in the West, we have a lot of big hard rock mines that are pre-law that can contaminate miles and miles and miles, thousands of miles of streams throughout the Western United States, not just in Colorado.
Right. Yeah, the downriver states too, and
upriver. Or even Montana. Montana had a huge mining legacy. Has a huge mining legacy. Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, the whole West, California.
Yeah. Well, tell us. So, let's say that a mine was active from, let's say 1870 to 1893 or something, and then so what happens to that mine after it's abandoned in terms of how nature tries to take over and what happens to it?
Well, it really depends on the mine itself.
Sure.
And depends on the chemical properties of that mine. So in terms of land ownership, if that mine was patented, that is private land.
Okay.
Some of those private claims were sold or taken over by the federal agencies, but some of them have not been. Many of them have not been.
Sure.
And so that's private land in the state of Colorado.
Right.
We see it up in Irwin. Those are old mining claims.
Sure. Or also up in Pitkin, there's a ton of them up there, or Tin Cup. Yeah, anyway.
Pitkin, Tin Cup. up even in Washington Gulch,
sure,
Elkton.
Yeah.
Those are old mining claims, and you can always tell because they're rectangular.
Right. Yeah, they're these weird
yeah, they're
rectangle
like a perfect
shapes.
rectangle shape. But so anyways, that mine would sit there. I'll give an example of a mine that I worked on,
Okay.
Which was the Frank Huff mine down at the summit of Engineer Pass in Hinsdale County.
Okay.
That mine ceased operation in, I believe it was the early 1900s, maybe 1912, somewhere in there. And what was left there was a draining mine and about 40 or 50,000 cubic yards of very acidic mine waste.
Okay.
So nature really didn't do a whole lot to reclaim itself.
Okay.
Because it's just the pH of the mine waste there was they weren't actually tailings, it's waste rock. People confuse the two. So tailings have been processed at a mill, and waste rock is something that's just pulled out of the ground that has the ore in it.
Okay.
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 It has the minerals in it that they're mining.
Okay.
Or it's the rock that they move out of the way to get to the ore.
Okay.
But tailings are different.
They've been processed.
They're generally like a sandy material.
Okay, sure. Okay. I can picture that, yeah.
Yeah. So there was, 40,000 cubic yards of waste rock left at the site. The pH of those were very acidic, in the 2 to 4 range. So 7 is neutral.
Right.
And so very acidic. Nothing was growing on it. And it just kind of sat there. And snow melt would go through it, and it would leach out metals.
Mm-hmm.
And the draining mine, continues to drain. And they drain groundwater.
Yeah.
And it just sat there until a few years ago when we did work up there. So, a lot of times they just literally sit there. Sometimes there's open shafts or open adits.
Yeah.
And really, a lot of them don't look a whole lot different, I would imagine, than they did when they were mined.
Wow. Even after all this time.
Yeah.
So
now, ones that are mined in areas that maybe don't have high sulfide minerals, those oftentimes will reclaim themselves. And that happens. You'll get nice vegetation growing on them. Or,
is that still a hard rock mine, or is that different types of mines?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just depends on what the rock that they were mining in was.
Yeah.
If they were mining in something like a dolomite or a limestone or a marble that has neutralization potential, it'll neutralize the acidity in whatever the mineral sulfide veins are. And so sometimes you'll get, you won't have to really do anything with those.
Okay. So what's, and I can kind of understand this in my head, but what's the difference between a rock that's just sitting on the ground naturally versus one that was pulled out 100 years ago and is now on the surface? Why is it so different?
Well, so if you have let's say you have a rock outcrop, or, that has some sulfide mineral veins in them. You have just the base of the rock to weather.
Right.
When you pull it out and you break it up into a bunch of pieces, it creates, a significantly more surface area that allows the metals to react with oxygen and water, which then in turn creates acidity, and then can be soluble in water and run off into the creeks and the grasses and everything around it.
Right. So these old mines, do they all need reclamation, or can some of them just be left alone then?
Many of them can be just left alone. There are 24,000 abandoned mines in the state of Colorado.
Okay.
Maybe a quarter to a half of them actually need some sort of attention.
Really? Okay. So it's not.
It's not all of them. And that's I'm speaking environmentally.
Right. Sure.
Okay. So, there are thousands and thousands of open mine holes that we've closed. And off the top of my head, I'm not remembering that number exactly.
And that's just closed to
prevent kids from falling in them,
right.
or people from walking in and getting asphyxiated because the air is bad.
Right.
I want to say the number is somewhere around 10,000 that we've actually closed in the state to date.
Wow.
And we close generally about 300 a year.
In this episode's Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, I thought we would talk about how we are doing in the first half of 2018 versus the first half of 2017. So in 2018, there have been 166 sales in the Crested Butte area, totaling roughly $78 million. And in the first half of 2017, there were 173 sales, so about the same. But that totaled $99 million, so quite a bit more. So why is that? Well, I think the main reason is that in 2018, there's just been a lot more sales in vacant land. So roughly a third or so of the sales have been in vacant land, and in 2017, that was only about a quarter. So a lot more people looking for vacant land and looking to build their own home instead of an existing one. A lot of that has to do with just not finding the right property anymore, the right home. So that is where we are at in the first half of 2018. My name is Frank Consella. This is my podcast. You can always contact me at CrestedButteRealEstateAgent.com. My contact info is there, and I'd love to talk to you about real estate in Crested Butte or in Gunnison. Okay, so how do you go about reclaiming a mine site then? What's the process?
Well, it really depends on the mine.
Well, yeah, I understand.
We do so many different things. We do, first and foremost, human health and safety is our number one concern.
Okay.
So closing physical holes in the ground.
Like we were just talking about.
Yeah, we do everything from just a simple backfill. Sometimes we build steel grates over them, which I'm sure you've seen if you've been in and around this area.
Sure.
I've done many in Crested Butte. We'll do walls, doors, whatever. Oftentimes a landowner will request that we maintain access, that they maintain access
Sure.
to the mine.
Sure.
And so the landowner, they'll request that. When we build our closure, generally if it's a grate to put a door in is no big deal for us, the same amount of steel really. So
Sure.
we'll go ahead and build a door and give them a key to the lock. But it keeps the public out, but allows the landowner access.
Of course, yep.
And we do these on public land and we do them on private land. And then, we do environmental work. And usually that's with a partner because we don't have a lot of funding to do environmental work. So we generally leverage our funds with our federal partners, the BLM and the Forest Service, to accomplish environmental cleanups. For example, the one I was explaining to you on the top of Engineer Pass, we did a consolidation of the waste. So we took there were two large waste piles, we consolidated them into one.
Okay.
And then capped it with an impermeable liner.
Okay.
And then excavated rock from nearby to actually cap that liner.
Okay.
And so what we've seen from that, we have an area that's actually has some grass growing on it, probably for the first time in 100 years. We have the rock repository. And downstream of that site, we've seen the metals go down by 2 orders of magnitude.
Nice.
And we've seen the pH go from about 3.5 to about 6.5 in 4 years. So very successful kind of.
Nice.
And all that was just stopping snowmelt and rainwater from leaching through those from leaching metals out of those materials. And so that's something that we've done. We'll do waste consolidations. We cap waste. We just did one out here, partnered with the BLM, the Health Department, the Coal Creek Watershed Coalition.
And this is Smith Hill again?
No,
or?
This is Gunsight. This is where the old there was that old shed there forever.
Okay.
Out, just on the other side of Gunsight Bridge, where the lower loop and the GB loop kind of goes around.
Sure, yeah.
So when you would ride your bike past there, you could actually smell the acidity.
Sure, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
okay.
So we scraped all of that and consolidated it. It was a huge partnership, like I said, with BLM and Coal Creek Watershed Coalition, the Health Department, the Town of Crested Butte, the land trust. I mean, it was it kind of takes the village in those situations because we all have very limited funding, and so we leverage it with each other to be able to accomplish these projects. We do coal mine closures. We do coal fire work, and that's really interesting. So the coal fire work is it's difficult because the fires have been burning for 100 years, and the residual heat in those mountains it's very high, and so you need a fuel source, and you need oxygen, and you need heat to burn. And so with all those things, even if you cut off one of them, you still have that residual heat. And so we do a lot of excavation of burning coal, because we found that is the most effective way to extinguish it, is to actually excavate it and mix it with non-burnable material, non-combustible material.
Wow.
And so that's one method that we use. We quench sometimes. If it's a smaller fire and we're able to kind of get around it, we can dig it and quench it with a firefighting foam.
Wow.
Sometimes we're just doing surface control, which is managing vegetation over top of the fire so that they don't cause a wildfire.
I was going to say, in a drought year like we're having, those can start.
It's very concerning.
Fires.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we do the coal mine reclamation, and then we do some coal environmental work if it's associated with an opening. So like the Smith Hill mine, there were a few openings associated with all the coal that was down on the hill, and so it was kind of this holistic, the coal mines themselves, actually in the winter of 2011, which you remember was actually a really good one.
Right.
We had done the development a couple years earlier, and there was some holes up at Smith Hill, and then there was a big landslide. It must have been during snowmelt.
Because of the wet year.
Yeah, because of the wet year, and actually closed them up. So we ended up just doing the work on the wetlands, and then we actually did some revegetation up on the coal piles up on the hill.
Gotcha.
And I'm trying to think. We do some historic preservation work. For instance, there's a mine in Hinsdale County called the Ute-Ulay.
Sure, I've heard of that one.
And it's been about a 10-year project, and again, so many more partners than I can even name, but Hinsdale County has been key in trying to save that site, because it's the last standing mine and mill in that area. And so we did we actually restored a head frame, so big, tall, 60-foot head frame where they used to pull the ore with a pulley out of the mine.
Yeah.
And we were doing a closure underneath it, and the head frame was kind of precariously perched on it. And so in order to be able to get underneath it to work, we had to stabilize it. And so we actually restored it in that process. We've done some down in Cripple Creek and Victor, head frame restorations. We actually did the Forest Queen up here, the head frame restoration on
Where's
the
the Forest Queen actually?
It's Irwin.
Okay.
It's above Irwin.
Okay. I don't know if I've actually been there.
Yeah, we've done we do quite a bit of historic preservation. It's really important to us that while we do go out and reclaim these mine sites, that we're not just erasing or whitewashing the history of them.
Yeah.
It's a really important piece of history for the state of Colorado, and so it's important to us to try and maintain some of that historic flair. And that's why a lot of times we build a grate on something, because you want to be able to see there was a mine there. We just don't want to be able to go in and, fall and die in it.
Right.
But you want to be able to still see it.
Right. And who knows, maybe someone will want to mine there again if
someday.
If
you never
the
know.
Prices change or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I guess you've already... what are some projects near Crested Butte that you might work on in the future? Are there some that you're kind of thinking about?
So this summer, I have some work slated at the Standard Mine.
Okay.
So the Standard Mine is an EPA Superfund site. However, there are sections of the Standard Mine that were not included in that Superfund designation.
Okay.
That are owned by the Forest Service. And so we'll be partnering with the Forest Service to finish up some work at level 5 and level 98 of the Standard Mine. There'll be some wetlands restoration, which is always really exciting to me. we'll go in. Last year we went in and moved a lot of waste out and actually excavated down to the original ground surface. And then this spring we'll go in, or this summer at some point we'll go in and revegetate the wetland there. And then I'll be working. I'm going to do an in situ waste cleanup just south of Blue Mesa on BLM land. So we'll be partnering with BLM on that.
What kind of mine was down there by Blue Mesa?
I'm not sure what the mine exactly was. There was a lot of gold mined in south in the Coachtope. Oh, okay. In the south in that area. This is actually on the Lake City Road on Highway 49.
So it's heading that way.
It's heading towards Lake City. Okay. I don't have a ton of work scheduled for Crested Butte this summer. But in the future, we'll probably continue maybe some work up in Irwin, maybe some work out in Poverty Gulch area. We'll probably be sampling some mines in Poverty Gulch this summer. Some waste rock piles, the Augusta mine, and some of the mines in Baxter Basin.
Okay, yeah, there's a whole bunch back there.
Yeah, I mean, in the past we've done kind of the low hanging fruit in Crested Butte, which was the peanut mine, was done in 2005. So that was before my time. That was a coal mine, and then it was also a silver mill. So it was in the 50s they built a mill there and actually milled silver on the coal mine. And so that's why that site was very interesting. That was another, huge partnership. Again, like these big environmental cleanups really are partnerships. We are working with the EPA, or are kind of working side by side with the EPA and some of the non-governmental agencies in the Bonita Peak Superfund designation. So that's
near Silverton.
48 sites in Silverton area. And then I have a significant amount of coal work planned for this summer. So,
and where's that at?
We'll be working on the South Canyon coal mine fire, which is in Glenwood Springs.
Okay. And that was a seam fire in a drought year. That was the coal seam
fire in 2003, maybe, or 2002.
So another drought year, basically.
Another drought year, big drought year, yeah. And we've spent every few years we go into that fire, and there's a couple other ones around the state that are near population centers, high fire danger areas, and we go in and actually clear all the vegetation away from the surface expression of the underground fire.
Wow. That's wild to even think about fires just burning for decades and hundreds of years or whatever.
And the other thing is, last summer there was a lot of wildfires up north, and we had and down by Durango, we had I think 5 calls and ended up running 3 coal mine fire emergencies where a wildfire moved through a coal mining area and actually caught a coal waste pile on fire.
Okay, sure.
So I mean, that
makes sense.
Yeah, and so during a wildfire year, we really I pay close attention to where the fires are burning.
Yeah, for sure. So what does your job look like? How often are you hiking around to these old sites, and how much are you in an office doing stuff like that?
Well, I don't get to hike around as much as I used to.
Fair enough.
But our project managers probably in the summertime spend 3 to 4 days a week out in the field.
Really? So the majority of their time?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I've had summers where I couldn't buy a day in the office. It was like, I need an office day so bad. But, when the weather's good and you want to keep out there and keep moving and you're running projects and everything else. My role has changed. I became a senior environmental protection specialist in 2016, and I actually manage our West Slope team now. So I have 5 project managers that work, that I manage. I don't want to say they work for me because we all work together.
Sure. But, I don't even think you even said what department is that or whatever, or what's your...
Oh, I work for the Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety.
Okay, you might have said that.
The inactive mine reclamation.
And that's for the state of Colorado.
And that's the state of Colorado and the Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we spend I spend now maybe 1 or 2 days a week max in the field.
Even in the summertime?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm running a project, I'll be out more. But otherwise, especially this time of year, this is our bidding season. And so I have 5 project managers sending me bids that I have to review and then get to Denver to be put out to bid. And so...
For the contractors to do the actual work.
For the contractors to do the work.
They've decided it needs to be done.
Yes.
Okay.
So the project manager, the way the job looks, the project manager goes out, finds the project, determines what they want to do there, sources funding, bids the project, does the construction, and then closes it out and does monitoring and maintenance. Okay. So we've always, for the most part, we're cradle to grave with our projects, our individual project managers. Now, it's not always that easy when we're super busy like we are right now. But, sometimes temps have to do certain things, or, a project manager will get it to a certain point and then hand it off to somebody else. Okay. But, I mean, for the most part, we take a lot of pride and a lot of ownership in our projects. And,
I'm sure.
And so we try and, keep them rolling and moving forwards.
When you said sources funding, so that's like those partnerships, or how much is that coming from the state or federal or? So
we get a federal grant every year from the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement.
Okay.
That is the fee collection, Title IV fee collection from coal mining. Okay. So that is a fee is assessed on every ton of coal produced in the state, and then that is collected by the federal government, and then it's returned to the states based on the production in their state. Okay. So, some states like Wyoming that have huge coal production, they get more money than, say, like a state like Colorado that doesn't have a ton of coal production. Sure. So we have those funds, and certain projects can be funded with that money. We have state severance tax that we use, and that state severance tax is... used mostly for environmental and hard rock projects. Okay. And then we get quite a bit of money from partnering with our federal partners. Both the Forest Service and the BLM have abandoned mines programs. Okay. And we partner with them to do projects. Yeah. We partner with non-governmental agencies, watershed groups. Sure. Trout Unlimited. We partner with a lot of people. Oftentimes, we're each bringing a little bit of money in. We partner with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment in their non-point source program and several of their other programs. And that provides funding for us to do work. So it kind of depends on what the project is. Okay. If it's a coal project or a safety closure project, that's funded by our OSMRE money. And those funds, we apply for a grant every year. And so in September or October, I ask all my project managers, and then I have somebody just like me, the Front Range, that manages project managers on the Front Range. Okay. And then we have Jeff Graves, who is our director. Okay. Of the Inactive Mines program. So he's he manages Erica and I, and then we manage all the project managers. And, we bring all the proposed projects to an advisory council, and then they rank the projects, and then based on their rankings and kind of our recommendations, we send the grant off to the federal government, and then it gets funded.
See what you get. Yeah.
So, and we don't really know how much we're going to get year by year because it's based on that coal production. So, we generally won't get less than $3 million because that's a minimum program state would be $3 million. Okay. So, but like this year we were slightly over that.
Gotcha. That's got to be hard to budget because you don't really quite know.
Yeah, and then but we do about $8 million in construction a year.
Oh wow. Okay.
So like I said, we have other funds. Our grants are good for 3 years, so we're constantly rolling money through, and and the project managers, it's really up to them if they have an environmental project or something else to try and work with their supervisors and their partners to try and figure out how to get that project accomplished.
Gotcha.
And sometimes it takes several years.
Yeah, right, to get it right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we can kind of start to wrap this up, even though I'm sure we could talk about this for a long time. But I guess I'll go to. I mean, Crested Butte is home for you. So why do you choose to live here in Crested Butte? Because it sounds like your job could be elsewhere too.
Yes. So when I first took the job, I was actually based out of Denver. But we're a decentralized kind of unit within our division.
Sure.
So they don't keep the mines in downtown Denver, right?
Right.
So you
have to spread out somehow.
Yeah, and so we have offices. We have people working throughout the state.
Sure.
And it really is. It works out really well because you maintain relationships and with the people in the community, and you're close by. So if there's an emergency, we have somebody there. We don't have to send somebody 8 hours from Denver to Cortez to an emergency. Like we had this winter. We had an emergency in Cortez this winter, and we have somebody in Durango. Right. And she was able to be there in a couple of hours. And so there's a real advantage to having people spread out throughout the state. But my area that I was working in at that time was Hinsdale and Gunnison counties. And so working that from Denver was about 9 hours a week in the car.
Sure.
And so
kind of wasted.
The opportunity came up to move down here because it was near the areas where I was working, and I just kind of fell in love with the place. I'm not a city person.
Yeah.
After living in Big Sky, when I lived there was 1,200 year-round residents. You couldn't even get a cup of coffee in the off season. So
you're right.
I really love that small town living, and this place really captured me, especially the summers here. They're just so incredible. Yeah. So, and my love for skiing and everything else. So it works out really well. I'm really close to all the areas I work except Craig.
Right. Well, and it's funny because I'll bring that. I mean, we're kind of centralized in a lot of ways. Like people always like, oh, you're out of nowhere, but if you're trying to get to different places like the San Juans and the Sawatch and these different ranges, we're actually very central. I am
centrally located so I have 5 project managers that are on my team. I have somebody in Durango and Ridgeway, Summit County and Leadville.
So you're smack dab in the middle.
And somebody in Crested Butte.
Yeah.
So I'm smack dab in the middle, and I can be to any of them in just a few hours.
Yeah.
And it's a really central, great location for my job.
Yeah. Awesome. If someone wants to know more about Mine Reclamation, where could they learn more about you or about the programs?
So our division website is mining.state.co.us.
Okay.
And our division is not just abandoned mines. We also do, we have the coal and minerals regulatory program and the mine safety program for the state are based out of our division of reclamation, mining, and safety. And
so if someone buys like an old mining claim and they want to just kind of dink around and pretend they're a miner, that's where they would.
Yeah, that's where they need to go to get a prospecting permit.
Because I get that call.
Yeah,
I get that call a lot actually. As a real estate agent, for sure.
And that's that's something that it would be advantageous as a real estate agent to kind of understand how that works and say, you just call the Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety. They'll get you lined out on how you can permit. I mean, prospecting permits are inexpensive, and there's. But anyway, so mining.state.co.us is our website.
Okay.
And it's kind of under construction right now.
Okay.
They can find out more about the Inactive Mines program there.
Okay.
If somebody wants to get a hold of me, they can email me at tara.tafi@state.co.us.
Okay.
And that's pretty much how you can get a hold of us.
Okay. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have?
I don't think so.
Okay. And one last question. Who else should I interview?
Ooh. Well, I think you should interview one of 2 people.
Okay.
Can I give you 2 suggestions?
Absolutely.
So Dave Kozlowski.
Yep. Okay, he was already on the list.
Dave would be great. He's just been in the Valley so long, and he's done so many different things.
Yeah.
And then Ashley Benbenick.
That you work with from time to time.
From time to time, yeah. But Ashley has, she and I work together a little bit, but she's really, really passionate about water quality. She's built her own business, and, and she's also, a phenomenal skier and a competitor, and I think that she would be a good interview as well.
Yeah, definitely. She's also been on the list. So, well, thank you so much for chatting today, and it was fun. And talk to you later.
Thank you.